Evening, guys. Coming to you from the Yurt here. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to work on this wool sweater that I said I had to do some repairs on, and it really, doing that is going to bring up a couple discussions that I wanted to have anyway. The first one is really about this needle to begin with, and about kit mentality. This repair needle, basically, that I've shown in several videos, is made for repairing canvas and cloth sails. Okay, that's why it's called a cloth sail needle. It's different than the needle that you would buy at like a Jo-Ann Fabrics. This is a wedge needle on 3 sides that comes to a point. It's a heavy duty gauge needle that's bulletproof. This is what I keep strapped to the back of my Pathfinder sheath all the time, and this is what I tell people they should carry in their 10-piece kit. We do sell these on our website. We've got a direct source for these from a sail manufacturing company where we get them from. The main reason that, I created this 10-piece kit to begin with was so that people could utilize 10 pieces of equipment that would get them by in an emergency situation for a 3-day plus type scenario where they were going to be lost or stranded. And it took me a very long time to come up with this 10 C's of survivability that's in my book, Survivability for the Common Man. That's also available on my website. But what I wanted to explain to you was that think about what we've done in this yurt over the last few days since we started in here. And really all the things that we've used have been encompassed in the 5 C's. We've used a cutting tool to process firewood and things of that nature. So we've used the first C. We've used combustion devices to start the fire. We have used covering devices to sleep under every night in the Wildy Wool blanket. We have used containers to cook with and to, get water hot to drink and things like that every day, as well as, the famous now bucket. And then cordage would be the last one. And cordage I've used, number 1, to put this shelter together. Number 2, I used as a clothesline to hang my laundry on the other day. You'll have to excuse me. It's getting pretty hot in here. It's actually not as cold tonight. It's about 35 outside. It's about 70 in this yurt right now. Plus, I'm starting to get the hang of the stove a little bit. I haven't used too many of these wood-burning type stoves. And I'm starting to get the hang of how to get this thing set up to draft, using the different baffles and the dampers and things that are on it to control it and make it nice and hot and not burn as much firewood. But so anyway, back to our discussion about, the 5 C's. Those are what we've used, really, other than the foodstuffs that we've collected and used to cook things with. We've really been utilizing natural environment items in the 5 C's. So I created that kit for a reason. It's a very sustainable kit. You can actually sustain yourself for quite a long time with it. Now today, we're going to use another piece of that 10-piece kit in the cloth sail needle, as well as we're going to use cordage again. So this needle can't just be used for sewing. It has to be used for other things as well. And it has to be used for at least 3 things to qualify for something that I would put in my kit. And I showed how to magnetize this needle ahead of time to make a makeshift or redundant compassing device if you needed it in my book, Survivability for the Common Man. It's also very good for picking stingers and splinters out of your skin, as well as maybe picking out debris and dirt from an open wound and things like that. I can also use this to sew up my skin in an absolute emergency, as well as effect a repair on my gear. So this little bitty needle, that doesn't take up hardly any room, it's strapped to my nice sheath all the time, is a very, very useful item. I'm going to use it tonight to repair my gear. The other thing that goes along with that 10C mentality in the first 5 C's is cordage. And I wanted to have a quick discussion with you guys about cordage before I repair this sweater as well. Bank line is what I tell people to carry, not paracord. Paracord is a very useful item. It's been used by the military for a long time. But let's face it, paracord is for parachuting, okay? It's not for survival cordage. The military teaches it to be used for survival cordage because it's what the military has. The military doesn't use things like bank line. Bank line is much more versatile than paracord is. If you've ever taken the inside out of a piece of paracord, those 7 inner strands, they come apart very easily. They're not very conducive for actually using as cordage. They suck for traps. They're not very good for sewing. They're about half for dental floss. But bank line will do all of those things and a lot more for you. And it's a very much more versatile type cordage. Now we carry two sizes of bank line on our website. We carry a 325 pound test and we carry a 115 pound test. Both of these cordages are a multi-ply cordage, and that is something that I insist on with my students, is that they have a multi-ply cordage so you can break it down into smaller fibers when needed. Plus it gives you 3 times the amount of cordage. So really for the same weight on this spool, this is the 115 pound test, and for the same weight, the spool weighs about as much as 100 feet of paracord, maybe just a little bit more, but you have, at least 20 times the amount of cordage. And on a bigger spool of stuff like this 325 pound test, you have, 3 or 4 times the amount of cordage of paracord for the same amount of weight. And you can make this 2-ply reverse wrap cordage, and you're going to have, in essence, 650 pound test, which is stronger than paracord. So, but it's much more versatile. For trapping, I prefer the heavy stuff. For all around kit use, for sewing and things of that nature, I prefer the smaller stuff. So what I would tell people is, buy both. Buy a whole spool of both. It might cost you $40, but so does, 1,000 foot of paracord is $50. There's a lot more than 1,000 feet of cordage right here, and then you can carry a little bit of both. Maybe you take something like, this netting needle, and you wrap your small cordage on that, your 115 pound test, to use for making nets if you're so inclined, or for weaving if you're so inclined. But it gives you something to carry that on, and you can spool, 200 or 300 feet of it on here pretty quick, and then maybe carry a whole spool of the heavier stuff. I always carry a whole spool of the heavy stuff with me, and generally I'll have some of the smaller stuff stashed in my pack somewhere just for smaller chores, like what I'm going to do right now with repairing this sweater. So with that said, I'm going to put my glasses on. And again, this is called bank line. It's tarred mariner's bank line or net line. Some people call it catfish drop line. You can find this sometimes at Walmart, but you can always find it on my website in both sizes by the roll. And it is tarred, and you can smell it. When you smell it, if you don't smell tar, you don't have the right stuff. So what I'm going to do with this is, again, this stuff breaks down. So now if I take this 115 pound test and I break it down into 3 fibers, I'm going to try to get this up close to the camera for you so you can see how small these fibers become. But they're a lot more conducive to working with than paracord is when you break down the fibers. So let me see if I can get this up close to the camera where you can at least see these fibers pretty good. Looks to me like that's in focus pretty well. And there are 3 fibers there, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a couple of feet of this bank line, not even that much is all I'm going to need to effectively do these repairs, and just cut it off the spool with my Pathfinder knife. And then I'm going to unravel it. And there's a trick to unraveling this stuff as well. I showed this to Jeremy not very long ago. To pull this stuff apart, the easiest way to do it is to take one piece of it and put it, one of the plies, and put it between your teeth. Take another ply and hold it in your hand and leave one ply loose. And then just pull on this one and untwist the cord at the same time. Untwist it with your hand at the same time. If you lose it out of your mouth or it comes undone, just grab it up again. Just like that. And then just choke up on it. And once you pull it apart, the other 2 strands will come apart pretty easy. It's just getting that first one out. That's kind of the pain. And then you can just kind of straighten it out in your hand. It'll be kinky, obviously, because it was cordage. But you can just kind of pull all the kinks out of it. And once you get the kinks fairly out of it, then you can just kind of run it down through your fingernails down to the bottom, and it'll straighten it right out. And then you'll have, a good piece of thread that you can use, and it's plenty strong. I mean, this is a 115 pound test, remember that. So one piece of this stuff, divide that by 3, is going to be, what, 40 pound test, almost, pretty close to that. So now I'm just going to grab my canvas repair needle, cloth sail needle, whatever you choose to call it. It's basically a canvas needle. Pull that halfway through there, and I'm just going to go ahead and tie that off on the back side and leave myself a couple tails to tie to. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys how to sew. It's funny that sometimes I just forget to say some of the simplest stuff, because I guess I kind of assume, and that, you know what assume means, but I kind of assume that people watch all of my videos sometimes. So I'll sit there and you know, do a video like I did with washing my wool underwear the other day, and I didn't ever tell anybody that the lye in the ashes is what makes, you know, the solution, a cleaning solution with the water, because lye is the main ingredient in soap and it comes from the ashes. But I never said anything about that because I assumed that everybody would know that from watching my lye soap video, and I saw a lot of questions about that. So I apologize to you guys because, you know, two is one is none, and redundancy are, you know, Pathfinder concepts, and I slip up sometimes and don't redundantly say things over and over in case people don't say other videos. So anyway, once I've got that tied off and I've got some tails, now I'm ready to do my sewing. You know, sewing is very easily affected. All you need to do is just do an overhand loop. Actually, I've almost got too much light here with this candle light and the other one beside me here, but I'm just going to take a little bit of this wool and chunk it in just like this, and I'm just going to go overhand and then loop it through. So I'm almost making a half hitch on every turn. Pretty simple. It's not a very big hole anyway. Again, I'm just looping it over to make a half hitch basically on every turn, and I'll do that and go all the way back the same way. Almost forgot to go through there. I'll go back the opposite direction when I'm done, and I'll go just a little bit past where the tear is and start a little bit ahead of the tear because I want to make sure that it doesn't get weak over time. And then I'll just turn this thing around and I'll go back the other direction and do the same exact thing, trying to kind of go through the loops that I already made if I can. If I can't, it's not that big of a deal, guys. I mean, we're after fashion, or we're after function here again, not fashion. You know, that's another thing that I tell people all the time. It's cool to be fashionable, but practical is what we really want. Functional. I just don't want this thing to tear out again. And then when I get down here toward the end, remember I left myself a couple of tails hanging out there when I tied that off to begin with. So that gives me a couple of tails to tie off to. So I'll make sure I go right up to where those tails are at, and my last loop will come up to where those tails are at, so that I can just tie a square knot where those tails are at real quick. And again, that's another advantage to this tarred bank line, is that it grabs onto itself very, very well. So it's very, very conducive to making a good tight knot because of the tarring. These knots aren't going to come undone on you, okay? And that's a good thing. All right, so that takes care of the hole that we had in our wool sweater. And I think I've got one more I've got to fix, and then I'll have, you know, something that's not going to leak air in that's not supposed to.